That's fine. All right. So, first portion is the Alchemy Rebalances and changes and whatnot. And um, one of these days I'll figure out how to get this font. I think it's the WotC website, but whatever, it's fine. So, we got a bunch of changes in Alchemy, and it's really for the digital space, but it's going to be mostly they're looking for focus on Alchemy as opposed to, historic or anything else. And there's a bunch of stuff also that's going on in the next coming months, especially with they're trying to find a format that they want, paper mimic and all that. And they just had one finish, which I'm actually going to mess with a little bit on stream today, but which is Blast from the Past. I got a deck build. I'm not really too keen on it, but it's fine. However, for the digital space, there were some changes. And these are in effect, they should be going in effect today in about a couple of hours. So we might have to relog or whatnot. But we'll start with Cobbled Lancer. And Cobbled Lancer used to be, was a 1-drop that's a 3/3, but you had to exile a creature card from your graveyard. And the old card, or the old version, you had to pay 4 to exile Cobbled Lancer from the graveyard and draw. Now it's only 2. Does this mean anything? No. I don't think this changes much. It wasn't seeing play before. I don't think adding or discounting it for 2. The problem with this card wasn't that you paying the 4. It was getting it into play. And yeah, 2 is a lot easier to pay than 4, but I don't think that was the major problem with this card. So we'll see what this does. But the majority of these are buffs, and there's a couple of nerfs. But the majority of the buffs are really geared towards the zombie archetype, and this is one of them. Like I said, I don't think this changes much, as the zombie decks were not trying to play this. So the self-mill decks might try this to exile it for 2 to draw, but it remains to be seen, considering how good the removal is in this format. So I don't think this changes much, but this is a cool take on specifically this card and that archetype anyway. So Death Priest, there was a mana cost for the triggered ability, and a 4/4 for or 3/3 for 4 wasn't that good to begin with, and it's a lord, but usually good lords start at 3 mana, not 4. And at the beginning of your end step, there was a mana cost. I think it was 1, possibly 2. If a creature died this turn, you create a 1/1 black skeleton token, which is really a 2/2, because this gives all skeletons, vampires, and zombies +1/+1. It used to be a 2/2, now it's a 3/3, so basically it's on rate for 4. But you want your lords to cost 2 or 3 mana. You don't want them to cost 4. And yeah, it generates its own slew of creature tokens, but the creatures have to die. And the sacrifice decks that are being run around in Alchemy already, yeah, they were announced yesterday. What's going on, Nimblesloth? And these take effect today. And I don't think the change of making it a 3/3 and discounting no mana cost now changes this to allow this to see play. But this is about as high as it's going to go. I don't think making this a 4/4 or making it any other buffs will make this legit or not, but it's a cool buff to see because it allows you to you don't have to pay the mana cost, and it being a 3/3 doesn't die to just every removal in the format, but there's a lot of 3 damage. Yeah. Well, you're getting that information now, so stay tuned. Falcon Abomination. The only change here, it was a 2/2 for 3 that had flying, and when it entered the battlefield, it made a 2/2 black zombie creature token with Decayed. Well, now it has Flash. The problem with this card as a common wasn't that, Decayed creature tokens are really, really bad. And having a 2/2 Flash for 3 is not really going to change this, and it's not constructed playable. It wasn't constructed playable, and giving it Flash doesn't do it either, and a 2/2 black zombie token that can't block doesn't really do anything either. If the creature token wasn't Decayed, which I think Decayed is just like, it's a pretty bad mechanic altogether. Cool for limited, but unplayable basically in constructed. And giving it Flash doesn't really do anything either. Hobbling Zombie, 2/2 with Death Touch, used to cost 3, now it only costs 2. And when it dies, it gives you a 2/2 black creature token, or zombie creature token with Decayed. This might actually be okay. 2/2 for 2, and has Death Touch as playable. So you use this as a sack outlet, and then you get another sack outlet, so it's basically a 2-for-1. Still, the Decayed is a little bit annoying, but it's fine. Like, the reduction in cost going from 3 to 2 is a big deal, especially on a creature like this. This is basically on rate now. So if the zombie decks are going to play something, especially with Exploit, this is one of them that you could play that you don't feel too embarrassed to do, especially when it gives you a creature token. I mean, it's fine. Narfi, Betrayer King, reduction of costs. It costs 4 instead of 5. The problem with this card, much like everything else, is the reduction of cost wasn't the issue. The snow mechanic has been getting nerfed to the ground. Faceless Haven is almost unplayable in Alchemy specifically because it's not a 4/3 anymore. And the zombie decks weren't missing lords. It was more of, it's really hard to play a snow mechanic with multiple colors. And the chances of you getting a rebuy off of Narfi is almost impossible in 2 colors, especially in 3 colors. And if you're going to use this, you're almost not playing blue, even though the zombie deck is blue-black. But like I said, the majority of the time that you weren't casting this, you were trying to get the payoff of returning it to play, not because you couldn't cast it. So, I mean, it's a buff and a cost, but the card wasn't playable before, and then giving it Flash is not going to make it playable either. This ghoul, it was a 2/2, or was a 2/1, now is a 2/2. 2 cost, sacrifice another creature. You can only activate it once per turn, but it gets +2/+2. Whatever. They're buffing the zombie cards, but they're not. Most of these are not going to be. They're not going to see constructed play. So I don't see, like, cut off. Why does this only activate once a turn? Like, I just don't understand. But sure. Skull Scab, Dimir Colors, 2/2, Exploit. Whenever a creature control exploits a creature, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Before, this card said if you exploited a non-token creature, now it's just any creature. This might actually see play. The problem with the zombie deck, 1 is the colors, and 2, the creatures didn't feel powerful enough and everything was like 2 or 3 toughness. And when you're playing against decks that have Meat Hook Massacre and Divine Purge, especially when these decks are creating so many 2/2 black creature tokens with either, Decayed or not, is such a feel bad when you're getting wrathed on starting on turn 3 or turn 4. So, yeah, you can use this for Necroduality, but The major issue with the creature decks right now in Alchemy specifically is, can you get around Divine Purge? Can you get around Meat Hook? And the mid-range decks can. The creature decks remains to be seen. And I'm not impressed with the zombie changes. Now, here's one that I think might actually be worth it. Stitched Assistant. 1 blue, 1 colorless, 2/1 exploit. When Stitch Assistant exploits a creature, scry 2 and then draw. It did cost 3. Now it only costs 2. And instead of scrying 1, it's a scry 2 and draw. Now it was a 3/2. Now it's a 2/1. Costing 2. It's basically the creature version of what's that card? It's a spell. I can't remember what the spell's called, but this is the creature version of that. And the website says that the reason they changed this is because if you drew... Well, yeah, preordain. What's going on, Ricky? Happy birthday. Happy belated birthday again. It's not so much that this is preordain, it's that there's a spell in Standard right now that costs 2 and it's a spell, scry 2, draw 1. And creatures are better at that than spells are most of the time. So this might actually see play. I'm not sure how much play. But if the zombie deck is a thing, this is going to be in it. Because now you can play this and Fellstinger, as opposed to deciding whether you're going to play this or Fellstinger, because Fellstinger costs 3 and this used to cost 3. Now you could basically get the same effect off of... This is basically your way of having... consistency and redundancy was the word I was looking for. Haka now is a 3/3 instead of a 2/3. And it looks at the top Alron's ability now reveals the top 3 cards from 2 cards. So at the beginning of your end step, choose a card type, reveal the top 3 cards of your library, put all cards of this chosen type revealed this way into your hand. And Haka is now a 3/3. I don't know if this card is playable. The backside being a 3/3, being able to block now, I guess is relevant. A 2-drop a 3/3 flyer. Possibly. I don't think the front side of Alron is still playable. I'm not sure. But being a 3/3 might actually see play, but it remains to be seen. I don't know. Like, a lot of these buffs are just a little bit of tuning, and you have to basically play with it to see how well it does. And you're not going to know just by looking at it, because those small little adjustments have to be tested. You can't just look at it and go, I'm not sure. But this might actually see an uptick in play, as opposed to being like it's basically unplayable. Cosmos Charger now costs 3 instead of 4. And the Foretell cost is now 1 blue instead of 1 blue and 2 colorless. Is now a 3/2 from a 3/3. This might actually be playable now. A 3/2 for 1, or a 3/2 for 3, depending on if you foretold it or not. Now allows you to have, you foretell this for 2, and then now you have a way of playing this for 1 at the end of the turn because it still has flash, and then having removal or counter magic or whatever, as opposed to having to pay 3. So I could see this actually seeing play also in Alchemy, because it only costs 1 now after you foretell it. 3/2 is a little bit, is kind of because it dies to everything, having a 2 toughness, but it still has everything else. And I'm looking to actually play with this now, because now you're able to. So on the same turn that you cast this for the foretell, you can now foretell cards on the same turn, and you could foretell them for 1 and do it at any player's turn. So this might actually be relevant. Is there any decent foretell cards with foretell cost of 2 mana? Well, when you foretell something, it always costs 2 mana. Now it only costs 1. So, for example, you can flash this in for 1 foretell, and then foretell Behold the Multiverse and something else for 1 mana on their turn, and then untap and have all that stuff on your turn, right? And this can be done at any time. So yeah, this might actually see play. Just not sure what shell, right? Gitrog, basically the opponent is forced now. Removed opponent's option to sacrifice a token creature or re-sacrifice token creatures. So you have to sacrifice a non-token creature, essentially. I don't think this changes how bad this card is, but it does change the fact that Wedding Announcement was so prevalent in the format. Now you can't sack 1/1 tokens now. But it doesn't change how bad this card is, because they still can sacrifice creatures. But maybe that distinction between they have to sacrifice creatures because there's so many token creatures out. But now that they can't sacrifice token creatures, like Wedding Announcement tokens or anything else, it might be relevant. Remains to be seen, though. It was largely unplayable before. I didn't even know this thing had Menace. Not that it matters. Possibly okay, but yeah, surprisingly good versus red decks, yeah. Tibalt, the second ability now deals 4 damage instead of 3 in both instances. So the +1 Tibalt deals 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker, unless its controller has 4 or has Tibalt deal 4 damage to them. If they do, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. The problem wasn't the how much damage it did. It's the fact that the opponent can choose, right? And that's terrible. And it was already fine, but it's I didn't like this card to begin with. Excuse me. But this doesn't change anything. 4 damage doesn't really matter. And if you do 4 damage, like they don't have to take it, right? Or rather, excuse me, misspoke. They can just take the damage. I don't think this changes much. Tireless Anger was unplayable before. Making it with Swamps doesn't matter either. This card was severely unplayable, still unplayable. This is the one that I'm excited for. Vega the Watcher. It now has Ward 2. And this ward is a big deal. Alright? Anything that gets ward, they have to spend mana for this. And the problem is how fragile this card was. And now you're able to... Yes. Chat's asking if the buffs carry over to Historic Brawl. And yes, it does. The Ward 2 now allows you to play this on the draw or on the play. On 3. And on the play, they have to have a 1 mana removal spell when they untap for 3 mana. Or they can't kill it on the turn that you play it. And now you can start casting spells from with flashback or with foretell, or if you exile them. The War 2 is pretty good because the 2D it was either give Ward 2 or up the defense on this card. But now you're able to have Disturb, Flashback, Foretell, if you're playing Jeskai with Expressive Iteration or any other card that exiles it and allows you to play it for the turn. Same thing. So every one of those, and this isn't an activate or triggers only once type of deal. This can do it at any time. So, and it's also a spirit. So, yeah, this with Disturbed, those enchantments might actually be relevant. I want to actually play with this. I do want to play with this in an unfair way with Reality Chip, but you can do this with spirits because it is a spirit itself. Town Razor Tyrant gets nerfed again. Nerfed. Now it doesn't happen on the upkeep, it happens at the end step. So at the beginning of your end step, this permanent deals 2 damage to you unless you sacrifice it. This is not a nerf either. Alright? This is basically a half a turn. And if the 2 damage wasn't relevant to you when your turn started, I don't think it matters if the turn, like, it's not the same power level as the nerf to Aspirant. I think this is a lot less relevant because the 2 damage is the 2 damage. And yeah, sacrificing your land at the end of the turn as opposed to the beginning, I don't think really matters. Yeah, and I wish they would just stop beating around the bush with this card and just make it deal 1 damage. Because it's still, the fact that it still deals theoretically 6 damage for 4 mana is a huge deal. And that's the problem with this card, is not that it makes you sacrifice or deal with at the beginning of the turn. It's the fact of how much damage it deals and how powerful it is when it hits play. Not the fact that, you know, turning your non-basic lands into, you know, irrelevant text. Maybe now they should start capitalizing the entire word. I already made a joke that the next nerf that they're going to make this card is going to cost 3 red and 1 colorless as opposed to 2 and 2. But they just need to take this off or give it 1 damage. One or the other. And here's the big surprise, chat. Fires of Invention is unbanned and rebalanced. And now it costs 5 instead of 4. So here's my question. Actually, there's 2 questions. The first question is, why? To both. Why bring it back and why rebalance it? Have you seen the historic format lately? When this got banned, this was the best thing to be doing. If you look at the format now, the format is Phoenix, Golgari Food, or Food Combo Sack, whatever, and Blue Eye Control. There are no creature decks in the format. There really aren't. And those are the best decks by far, and it's not even close. This does not bring any intriguing, interesting gameplay to the format, especially at 5 mana. And at 4 mana, it wouldn't add anything to the format except probably make Jeskai or Blue-White better. Which it already has Teferi. So why are we doing this? Where's Winota? Where's Field of the Dead? Where are these cards that give us tools to beat up on the decks that are already good? And it gives us tools to actually make archetypes instead of giving already existing archetypes more tools to use. Mainly the control decks. I don't think this adds anything because 5 mana is a lot. It's an eternity in this format. And honestly, you could have released this back as is at 4 mana, and I still don't think it does anything. No, I don't think it's busted at 4. because the game's already over. You play a game against Phoenix or Blue-White or Golgari Food at 4 mana or at 4, like the game's already over. And I'm gonna do something this weekend with Historic specifically, like what needs to be done, because I've already talked about it before on stream, where what the problem with the format is, and the format's problem is not so much controlling aspects. It's that creature decks don't exist because the removal is too good, mainly Unholy Heat. But Fires of Invention, I don't think this isn't going to see as much play as people think it does, and 5 mana is an eternity, and no amount of Divine Purges and whatever makes this card any better. And like I said, if you played Fires of Invention at 5 and played Teferi at 5, it doesn't change anything. The same thing was happening the turn you played Teferi anyway. So it doesn't matter. Okay, my watch is telling me to get steps. Stop it. I'm taking this off now. Yeah, don't tell you. I knew there was a reason why I wasn't wearing this watch most of the time. If the watch didn't know, I was at the gym this morning.
You have it set up to where probably it wants you to be active so often.
I'm literally active daily.
Mine does it to me.
That thing can go away. All right. So unless chat has anything else on what should be or what they think of the alchemy changes, overall, not really too much to say, not really too much to add, other than there's about 3 or 4 cards that, I like, or a couple of changes, but the majority of them don't add to the format and don't add anything to alchemy specifically. What we're really looking for is, today there's supposed to be some spoilers for the alchemy drop, and they're only making 30 cards this time, not 60. So all I'm hoping for is 1 or 2 of those cards are actually artifacts or enchantments and not so much color specific, but we'll see when we get there. For the Twitch crowd, we're going into Historic. For the YouTube folks, wait for the next video. All of the socials will be in the description below. Follow, subscribe to the YouTube there, posting on the Twitch channel here, and we'll see you then. All right.